Hello and welcome to From Mrs. to Me, a podcast where you'll be inspired by courageous stories of strength and resilience told by women just like you who have been through the upheaval of divorce. This is their journey from Mrs. to Me, finding their true identity and creating a bold, beautiful life. I'm Cassie Freeman and I'm your host, a certified life coach and divorced mother of two. Join me each week as we explore real stories of divorce and what it takes to transform and live in alignment with the real you. Hello, and welcome to another episode of From Mrs. to Me. I'm Cassie Freeman, divorce empowerment coach and your host. My next guest will inspire you as she shares her story of healing, which ultimately resulted in her decision to leave her marriage. Dr. Cassie Seal is a doctor of physical therapy, somatic therapist, owner, and founder of CassieSeal.LOVE, and creator of the Wisdom Healing System. As an expert in helping others heal, Cassie never would have imagined that her own journey to heal her digestive system would lead her to a question of whether or not to leave her 17-year marriage. She now refers to her relationships as the holy grail of healing because the inward cause of all physical symptoms and disease also reflect outwardly into our relationships. In addition to her private coaching and teaching, Cassie is currently writing her first book, which is so exciting and I want to get to today, called Choosing Divorce, which chronicles her journey arriving at the choice to leave. She describes it as one of the most painful and difficult choices of her life, but in the end, she vowed to make the choice not from resentment and anger, but from love and compassion, both for herself and her husband. There are times when change is necessary to invite further growth and evolution. The key is being able to discern if this is true for you or not. She is an advocate for more divorce. She is not an advocate for more divorce. She is an advocate for more love. So welcome, Cassie. I'm so happy to have you here. So much to explore today.
Yeah, thank you, Cassie, for that. I'm super excited to be here as well and share whatever bits of my story needs to be shared with your audience. This is exciting.
Great. Well, I typically like to start just by sort of going back a little bit. As you know, this podcast is about transformation from Mrs. to Me. So on this podcast, I do want to really get to pre-divorce initially. So can you take us back to prior to your divorce and share with the audience, when did you realize that something needed to change in your life and marriage?
Yeah, so I would say the starting point was having children, which I call my children my little spiritual awakeners because I have two. One's almost 15, the other's 10. And both of their births heralded in a lot of change, as all children do, but
Right.
Also just a lot of growth. And it was really, I think, the first time in my life where I really had to look inward and figure me out because everything around me felt like it was falling apart. With my oldest daughter, I was diagnosed with gestational diabetes when I was pregnant with her. And as a physical therapist, I was very body centric. So I ran my first triathlon right before she was born. And so I dove into like nutrition and diet and cut all sugar. Like I was obsessive about it because I was so committed to healing my body and so distraught after I had her because most of the time the blood sugar regulators go away with childbirth and mine did not. I continued to have issues with my blood sugar, which led to a bunch of digestive system issues where I was just fatigued all the time. My body wasn't processing the food. My blood sugars continued to be off. Just a lot of indigestion type symptoms. And we had made the choice when my daughter was born for me to be the primary breadwinner. And my husband at the time left his work and we moved back closer to family. So not only was I trying to heal my body, I was also working full time, new mom, as you can imagine, just a ton of stress and weight on my shoulders. And it launched me into at least 5 years where I was heavily restricting my diet, no sugars. I wasn't eating out. I was quite miserable, honestly.
Sounds it.
I was, but I was so determined, and I thought, as a physical therapist and everything that I had learned about medicine, I thought, well, if there's something wrong with my digestive system, I'm going to heal it through what I eat. And I was so focused on that I completely missed all the other things that were going on in my life. And it wasn't until about 5 years after I had my daughter that a woman, like a spiritual counselor, I did a session with her at the recommendation of my acupuncturist. And I relayed my whole story to her. And she basically, I don't know if you're familiar with Louise Hay, but she pulled out Louise Hay's interpretation of diabetes. And she said to me, it's interesting that your body's having trouble regulating sugar sweetness, and your life seems to lack all sweetness right now. And it was just one of those moments where, like, you feel like a brick has hit you upside the head. And
yes.
I didn't like, it was, I knew it was profound in that moment, what she had said. I knew there was so much truth in it. It was like that gut punch moment. But I didn't know what to do with it yet. I just knew, like, oh, it's not like that shifted something in me where I was like, okay, the diet's just making me, taking me further away from joy in my life. And so it was that pivotal moment that really was like, okay, let's start coming back to joy and exploring what that really looks like. And so then, the whole journey is back to joy at this point. I have my son. We go through a really tough year. After he was born, he wasn't sleeping at night. So not only am I working full-time primary breadwinner, now I'm up all night also with my son, breastfeeding and nursing and rocking him back to sleep. And it was one of those moments where, like, you start questioning everything about your life and just like, why am I here? Why am I working this job to pay for a house I don't enjoy? It was at this point, I wasn't questioning my marriage. Like, it didn't occur to me that my marriage was part of the equation until a few years later, when I was at I think it was a craniosacral therapy workshop. I was learning how to dialogue. I do body dialogue and talking to the body. And I was learning how to do this. And I was working with another therapist, and she had her hands on my body. And all of a sudden she looks up at me and she goes, "Your beliefs about divorce are holding you back."
Wow.
And it was another one of those, like, sucker punch moments where you're just like, the breath just leaves your body and you're like, oh, like, what do you even mean? Like, I don't even know what to do with that. But I also knew simultaneously that if that were true, that it meant that I was headed toward divorce. And so that was kind of the moment of, like, eye-opening for me, even though I still wasn't quite ready. And this was probably 2 or 3 years before I actually chose divorce. And I knew I wasn't ready to look at what she had said yet, but it planted a seed in me, just like the gal about the diabetes and sweetness, right? It plants that seed that you just can't ignore. Like, you can kind of brush it aside for a little bit of time, but eventually, like, it just starts resurfacing. So that was the moment where I really started to understand that this was like, this journey to heal my body was deeper than just diet. It was deeper than just like finding more joy and like allowing myself to have more joy. It was really about healing my life in its totality, not just like coming back to myself in its totality, not just the physical aspect of it.
That is so beautiful, all of the things that you described, because I think what happens is, I find as women, as mothers, as career women, as the spouse, we tend to take on so much. And so we're going 1,000 miles an hour, and that overwhelm takes over, and we don't take the time to pause and say, wait a second, what do I need? We're just continuing to go on that hamster wheel. And it's funny, not funny, funny, interesting that you brought this up, because today, one of the things I was talking about and thinking about as I was journaling this morning was actually about how we miss these moments and these things that show up for us because we're going too fast and we're not seeing what's showing up. Because a lot of the things I feel we're being directed or moved towards, but we miss them because of all of that craziness that's going on. And we don't take a moment to stop and literally present ourselves, listen to what's coming in, and then take a breath and move from there. So I loved hearing that from you.
Yeah. And I feel like that time after my son was born and I was up all night long, I felt like the spiritual equivalent was like, it felt like God was like sitting me into this wooden rocking chair that was super uncomfortable and being like, I want you to sit there and think about how you got to this point. And it was the first time in my life where one, I was forced. I didn't choose to take the time to do it, but I was forced to really reflect about who I was, how I had gotten here. And that was such a different experience than just like I feel like my life up until that point was like Groundhog's Day and just autopilot. But that's also the conditioning and like childhood that I was brought up in, is just like you ignore the discomfort of your life and just keep going on the hamster wheel until you can't go anymore.
Yes.
And it's like, no. And that's and I don't know, like, I know you coach as well, but one of the things that I tell my clients, because it's all about like, let's come back to your inner wisdom and like listen into that voice, just like what you're saying. And one of the things, and I don't have data to back this up, but I believe it strongly, that if we're really tapped into our inner wisdom, I think we can eliminate close to 90% of what we do on a day-to-day basis. Like there's really very little that we have to do. But I think when our life is so uncomfortable, it makes us feel better to be doing than to actually be sitting with the discomfort of what we've created from all the unnecessary doing.
Yes, completely. And that's when the mind takes over. And the mind can be a great thing. It can also be a very bad thing. And, that when we don't slow down, we start believing all these stories, we start projecting way out, and we don't allow ourselves to sit, like you said, in that discomfort, because that discomfort is teaching us something. And that's how we grow. And so that's why I love your story, because I believe that so strongly. And I've seen it happen so many times when we listen to that inner voice and we lean into that discomfort, and then we start to make changes from that place. So I love it.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, had that woman never said that my beliefs about divorce were holding me back, I probably would still be married.
Yeah.
Like I just needed something outside of myself to kind of like shake me and wake me up to the fact of like, hey, this is an option.
Like, yes.
Why don't you look at this?
And sometimes it takes that. It really does.
Yeah.
So
totally.
One of the things I love to ask guests is about this whole sort of identity shift, because what I find is that in the work that I do with women after divorce is that there is this sort of shift that we go through around, we play these different roles in our lives, right? Where a daughter, where an employee, where a spouse, where a mother. And so one of the things that seems to really rock people is around this identity shift from a wife and a mom to a single mom to a single woman. And really, I think it's about stripping away kind of all of those identities and getting down to the core of who we really are. And so I want to ask you if you can tell me about that journey for you and sort of what I refer to as that sort of healing path to rediscovery. Can you tell me what that looked like for you?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing that comes to mind, and this was one of the questions in the time period when I was really deliberating between do I stay or do I leave? One of the things that came into my awareness was, the woman had said, it's your beliefs about divorce. So I started looking at, well, what do I believe about divorce? And consequently that led to, well, what do I believe about marriage? And so I really went back into my childhood and explored those questions. And from an identity perspective, what I came away with subconsciously was like, in order to be happy, I had to find a man who was going to provide for me, or I had to work really, really, really hard. And so that was the identity that I kind of adopted, even though I was still working really, really hard, but I also had this like sense of protection and safety from having this partner by my side. And then on top of that, I had this experience. I grew up with a father who was very much like an authority figure in the family. So like whatever he said went. And I had this conversation with him recently. There's a memory from when I was 3 years old where we were staying in Fort Myers, Florida, and we had decided to drive down to the Keys for the day. And we drove down, got out, played in the beach for like 15 minutes. And then my dad said, okay, everybody back in the car, let's go home.
Oh,
and
no.
my mom, like, I don't remember, I was 3, right? I don't actually remember. I just remember it from the story. But my mom still holds a lot of anger about that. Of course, she's got 2 young kids who are like, what we want to play at the beach.
Right.
And I asked my dad about that a few years ago. And I said, like, I have this story that's been told, and I really want to hear your perspective of it. And he didn't remember it, but he launched into this quoting the Bible where God says that man is superior, and God's like man has the final say and everything. He's saying all these things that I'm just like literally like choking back and like anger. Like I can feel this anger bubbling up inside me because he's just literally validating everything that I thought I believed. And I was asking him, hoping that he was going to like be like, no, I didn't believe that at all.
Right.
Like that's not what I was saying. But then he leaned in and he goes, but let me tell you something. I made all the decisions in the family, but I also had to live with the consequences of every decision that was made. And it was another one of those moments that completely took my breath away, because what I realized about myself was that I got married because I didn't want to make decisions for myself. I didn't want the responsibility. So this is coming back to the identity piece of like, I wanted to blame somebody else if I made a choice for my life that didn't go so well. And that, like, once I had that realization, that was really uncomfortable to sit with and to acknowledge and to even admit to my ex-husband now, like to admit that to him, like, hey, I put a lot of pressure on you to get me to happy. And that wasn't like that was my responsibility, not your responsibility. And there's also some humility and compassion in that of like, I didn't know I was doing that at the time. I know it now. And I'm like, I'm sick to my stomach about it. So coming out of marriage was really like, okay, now I don't have this crutch of having a partner by my side, right? To make sure that I'm successful and have money in the bank account and a house over my head, right? I don't have this anymore. Now I have to figure out how to internally and externally resource myself. And now I also have to make all the choices and decisions for myself in my life. And that was a really hard, I think part of me had this idea that like, it's just about making the choice to leave and then everything's going to come just fine. But really, like, I got married when I was 23, so right out of college. And I feel like it, like from the time of divorce, I feel like it kind of catapulted me back into that time, like right after like all the limiting beliefs and things that I was carrying at that time, like even though I'd been kind of protected from them throughout the marriage, like it was like, boom, right back in my face again. And like this kind of like young adult, like, I don't know what to do with myself anymore. So from that, like it was literally, like you said, it's like a falling apart of who I thought I was. And now I have to rebuild the pieces and figure out who I actually am. And I'm still like, I've been divorced almost 4 years now. So I'm still figuring out who I am and how to make choices for myself. It's not the divorce is final and now I'm me.
No, it's not.
It's such a journey and an evolution. But I will say it's well worth it. For me, it was well worth the journey. And I feel so much more connected to myself now than I've ever been in my entire life.
Yeah,
that means so much to me.
And it is, we're constantly learning. And what I love about what you did is that you really wanted to understand this. And not what's so great about it is I think that what a lot of us do is we look externally, right? This happened to me versus how did I contribute to where I am today? What what decisions did I make that led me to where I am today? Because we are constantly making all these different moves in our lives. And I think a lot of them are because of wounds that we haven't healed yet. And
Yeah.
so we continue to make those same mistakes over and over and over again and repeat old patterns because we haven't healed those wounds. And so I love that you did that, you really explored this. You talked to your dad and you discovered ultimately that, you know what, you didn't want to be the one to blame if anything went wrong. And so how much easier is it to allow someone else to take that? So that's amazing.
Yeah. And I want to speak to, like, in tandem to that, I was very aware that I was carrying a lot of blame and resentment leading up to, this decision making time. And I made a vow to myself. I was heavily studying like Buddhist meditation at the time, and it's all about like meditating on love and unconditional love. And what is that? And I start realizing, like, I don't have a clue what unconditional love is. Like, I really just don't know. And I made a vow to myself that I was not going. If I was going to stay in my marriage, the anger and resentment had to go, and if I was going to leave, it was going to go too. So it didn't matter really what I chose in that moment. For me, it became all about, let me get back to being able to love this person again, and make that was my intention. And to do that, I had to explore the inner stuff and how I had co-created. Right. In order to get out of blame and pointing a finger, you have to look inward and really understand, like, how did I contribute to this?
Yeah. Wow, so much here. I mean, I think, one of the things that you also said that I want to go back to is about this. A lot of women, when, it's not like you make this decision to divorce on a whim, right? Most people do not. It's a long process. I know for me, it was multiple separations. It was, marriage counseling. It was multiple steps before I got there. And then there's this belief that, okay, I've finally made the decision, right? I've gone through all this. I know this is what's for me. And you have this belief that at that point, oh my gosh, all this weight's going to fall off your shoulders once the divorce is final. And you're going to be able to recreate your life. Yes, I'm so empowered. And it doesn't always go that way. I know my experience was just like yours. It took me a long time to get there. There was a lot of things that I needed to unpack. And then when I finally did, I remember sitting in my living room at the time and thinking, oh no, now what? Financial insecurity started coming in. What about, my friends? Am I going to be alone? Like, what? And so that was another healing journey that I had to go through. And so I think, it's not sort of this big event, whether it's, divorce or it's some other big life event. It's really looking at it through this lens of what can I learn from this? And what do I need now to be able to move forward? And so, anyway, there's so many great things there that I could talk about forever. But one of the things I did want to talk to you about is how you sort of did that rebuilding for you. I mean, I think one of the things, or another thing that I talk about a lot, is around these pivots that we make throughout our life, right? Where we think the trajectory of our life is already planned out. And we know that this is the job I'm going to have for the rest of my life. And this is how, the friends I'm going to have, and all these other things that we have planned out. And it doesn't always work out that way because it's a journey. And so I'm curious, about after divorce, what was your journey in terms of looking at your life and the steps that you began to take to sort of figure out what that next path is going to be for you?
Yeah, it was hard. So I moved out of our family home the month that COVID shut everything down. So not only right, and that was like we knew my ex and I had been talking about that the separation was coming. We were waiting. My daughter's birthday is at the end of February, so we were kind of waiting until after that to tell the kids that this was happening. And then COVID literally came, and I was like, "Oh my god! Like I can't move out now. Like now there's this thing." Um, and so it was literally like a week or two into COVID, and I'm like in our laundry room having a near panic attack because I can't be in the house anymore. I'm so out of integrity. I know I just can't be there. And so I made the choice to move out like a week or two after that. And so it was hard because everything was shut down. So it's like my work almost completely dried up. So it was like spending a lot of time just me and the kids. I was living on the property with my mom and stepdad, and so it's just like just the four of us, five of us, and it was a slow process because part of what I'm actually discovering now in my journey is how important like community outside of family is for me, and that was something that I hadn't cultivated within the marriage. It was literally like he and I, the kids, and then like our moms and parents. That was our unit, and I didn't really socialize much. I had just started to toward the end of the marriage, really started to reach out and realizing like, oh, like I actually need I need more oxygen than what I'm getting from my
Right.
immediate family. And so COVID didn't really make that a possibility for me. And with my work, like I was like, I don't know what to put energy into here. So it was really just this kind of stagnant, stale time of like, I don't know what to do with myself. Probably for about a year. I ended up meeting a future partner we dated for the last 2.5 years or so. And one of the things, like before I got married, before I met my future husband, I was in college, and my best friend and I were like, we're going to travel after college and we're going to do all these service trips and blah, blah, blah. And the second I met my future husband, that kind of all went out the window. And so that came back full circle where I was like, oh, there's still this part of me that still really wants this. And so I committed, like I've traveled more in the last 2.5 years than I have in my entire life. Multiple trips to Europe. And it's been, for me, I think like coming back to that, like there was a part of me that knew in my late teens, early 20s that travel was something that I needed, not like there was a part of me that thought it was just irresponsible and I was trying to escape and I should do the responsible thing and all that. But like, and really I'm so blessed that I met the partner that I did because he was super into travel. And so I honestly don't know that I would have taken that leap had I not met this person. But I realized like as I traveled and as I engaged with life, like a part of me started to wake up that had been there all along. But it was like I would have moments where I would just cry tears of joy because I had never experienced that much joy in my whole life. And so yeah, I mean, I'm still on that journey. I'm still discovering what lights me up and what I need to bring me joy. It's like a daily it's a daily practice. And I love it. But travel has been one of the most I would say like profound things to help me open up. And I think it's different for everybody. I'm not saying like everybody who gets divorced needs to
Yeah,
go
yeah,
travel the
yeah.
world. Maybe. But for me, it like just allowing myself to interact with other people. And there's something about trusting myself that I can do it on my own. Like I remember the day I took my kids to Europe. It was just me and the kids, and I'm like we're running to get the plane because there was a short layover, and I get on the plane and I just start sobbing because I'm like, I got my babies on the plane, like I did it, like I have arrived. I'm an adult finally.
Yeah.
So just it's little moments like that where you celebrate and you realize you're capable of so much more than you ever thought you were.
Oh,
That are just
yeah.
so powerful and so healing.
Yeah, and that's part of the journey is sort of those empowering moments where you're like, "Oh my gosh, I did this." And to some people it seems so silly, but when you do it, it's like, for me, I mean, there were multiple moments, but I remember one of them was I had never taken myself out on a date. As weird as that sounds, like I never like gone to a restaurant and ate and had dinner by myself or done anything. So I remember someone had said this to me that, you got to learn to love being alone with yourself again. And I was like, whoa, that's scary. So I remember I actually planned a whole day. I love to be outside, and I went hiking, and it was lunch the first time, but I sat by myself at a table, and it was the most amazing experience, even being out on the trail hiking by myself. I talk about empowering, and it wasn't this huge, hike that I was doing, but it was doing it by myself. And
Mm-hmm.
it felt silly at the same time, but after I got home, I was like, yes, I did that and I'm ready to do it again. So I totally get what
Yes,
you mean
I
about
love
bringing
that.
the kids on the plane and like that whole experience, because it's incredibly empowering when you do that. So I love that. But speaking of the kids, I do want to ask you just a question around the family unit, because one of the things that I hear fairly often is that women are concerned when it comes to the changes to the family unit. So when you have children and you're going through divorce, you've already established sort of these traditions that you've had as a family. And it can be scary to think about, okay, now it's just going to be me and the kids. And what is that going to look like? So my question for you is, how did you navigate that change and, create those new traditions? And what did that look like for you?
Yeah, I'm still on that journey, but I think so. Going back to my beliefs about divorce and what that woman had said to me, one of the things my dad had cheated on my mom and they ended up divorced when I was in high school, and there was a lot of anger and hatred toward my father because of that. And so what I believed about divorce was that my kids were going to hate me. My ex was going to hate me. And that was the hardest thing for me in making the choice of like it was almost like my brain was so convinced that they would hate me if I did this thing. And so I recognized that there was a part of me that just wanted them to be happy. Like going the extra mile, making sure I'm not, catering to them a little bit more than I probably needed to. So there was a little bit of me trying to soothe their feelings just to make sure that they weren't mad at me. That looked like the first Christmas, right? I spent way more money on them than I normally ever
Know
did.
that story.
Now I like my traditions around Christmas, especially because I've traveled the last few years over Christmas. And so part of me is like, why do we do these traditions anymore? Like, I don't even understand them. It doesn't work for me. It doesn't speak to me. And so this year I think I don't even know. I think I spent less than $20 on each child and just got them something small. Because I would rather spend money on experiences than I would things. And they have grandparents and they have their dad who's still very much into buying them gifts, so they still get the tradition, but I've let go of feeling like I need to be the one to provide that just because that's what I grew up with or that's what we started them out as a family. So for me it's really been, and I love instilling that in them of just like, you can do whatever you want in life, like just because society or our community, our family has done something this way, it doesn't mean that you have to like do what feels good to you. And yeah, so I love being the one to kind of take the lead on that and stand in opposition to some of the wider family circle that I have, who's still very much like, no, we spend Christmas every year together and we do it this way. And even though like it's not the most fun and like, yeah. So it's like stepping out of tradition and letting yourself just recreate a life that really does feel good to you and speak to you. I think it's hard to know what that is because we're so ingrained in just ritual, I think, and how it's always been that most of us don't give ourselves permission to consider that like maybe we want something else for our life. So that's been, I like just creating a blank canvas or a blank chalkboard of like, okay, there's no rules here. What do I want to create for me and my kids?
Yeah. Thank you so much for that, because that is one of the things that I did my first Christmas after divorce was I said, okay, we're going traveling. And we went to, I live on the Northeast. And so we decided we were going to go to the Grand Canyon. And I'm like, man, I'm going to the Grand Canyon with two kids. And we did. That's what we did for Christmas. And it was
Yes.
the best trip. There were bumps along the way. Like we got lost a couple times. We hit a snowstorm going up to Grand Canyon, and it was a mess. But we have so many good memories from that trip and laughing, and just it was. I wish I could do it all over again. I may do it now that they're 21 and 19. Hopefully, I'll get that chance again. But it was so beautiful, and I was like, no, you're not getting any gifts this year. This is what we're doing. And
yes, I love that.
it was so amazing. So yeah.
I did something really similar. I forgot to mention it. Like 2 Christmases ago, I took my kids to California, and like to this day, they'll be like, it was an okay trip, whatever. But like my daughter was listening to MGK, Machine Gun Kelly. So like we had MGK, I rented a car, we drove up the coast. It was so amazing. And like every time an MGK song comes on the radio, we're all like, California. Like, so I just know, like, no matter what they say about it, like that trip is just permanently implanted in their little minds and their little hearts of like, yeah, I mean, whatever they want to take from it is fine. But like, I know that had an impact on them. And yeah, it certainly had an impact on me.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, wow. Well, you mentioned a minute ago, when we were talking about community, and COVID was so hard on all of us. And my divorce also happened right before COVID. So I totally get all of the things that you were sharing there. But what I wanted to focus on was the importance of, I refer to it as your village. So your people that are sort of there for you kind of throughout your experience of divorce, but also the changes that you have to that community. And really, when part of the journey is truly coming into who are you and being that real authentic, really accessing who is that real authentic you. And part of that is the people you surround yourself with. And so I'm curious, what was that experience for you after your divorce in terms of sort of finding that community for you?
Yeah, well, I would say finding the community started even before the divorce, because I had like just in the last, I don't know, 5 to 10 years, I had started studying yoga and craniosacral therapy. And so I found, and it was the first time in my life where I felt like I found people where I belonged. Like I found this sense of like, oh, there's other people like me. And so I was already starting to wake up to this idea that like family's not it. Like there's a family outside of my family that exists for me. But so it was 6 months, from the time that I admitted out loud to myself and to a dear friend of mine who's also a therapist, just sobbing in her office that I didn't want to be in my marriage anymore. And so she sat down and did a session with me and helped me get clear, like, okay, what do you need? And the answer that I heard from my inner wisdom was tribe. Like, I need to surround myself with people who are going to be my rocks through this process. And literally the people just came. I had 5 people who like I knew I could call on at any time. Like as you probably experienced, like just cycles of doubt, confusion, clarity, fear, like I was just cycling through it all for over 6 months. And these people were like I met with each of them almost every week, and I could call them anytime I needed to. And I wouldn't be where I am without them. I don't know that I ever would have actually gone through with what I knew in my heart was the right path had I not had these people. Like it was essential. And And that has been just built upon, right? Some of those people are still in my life. Some of them have kind of transitioned on and, moved on to other things. And that's okay. Like, I think some people are meant to be in our life for a short period of time and some stay for longer. But I'm still, I mentioned I was in a partnership for a while. And one of the things I recognize is like when I get into a partnership, I tend to shut out the rest of the world. Not because it's healthy for me, but because like, it's just, right. I just get like that tunnel vision. And so, coming out of that partnership over the last few months has been re-recognizing again of like, oh yeah, like tribe, community, like let's ramp that back up. And so that's been something that has been really fun, even just over the last few months of recognizing, I don't want to say recognizing the importance, but like recognizing when I'm in my radiance, like when I'm in my energy and my light, like people are just naturally drawn to me. And so it's almost like a signal of like, I know when I'm being authentic and I know when I'm like in alignment with my inner self because like the people are there and I feel, I feel supported and I feel seen and I feel recognized and held by my community, by my tribe. And it's like one of the best feelings in the world.
Yeah, it is. And it's so interesting you say that because that's yoga and my community at my yoga studio. I have the most beautiful, small, amazing community that I fell into when I moved into my new home. And I finally realized that I was sort of, I think I was just living, I had this costume on, that we all sort of put on sometimes and playing this role of when my kids were little, of being the perfect mom and, showing up in a certain way. And I was not showing up as myself at all. And when I let go of that story, whatever story that is that I hold on to of who Chrissy is, and I truly just energetically lean into the moment, and it's so beautiful what shows up in this community. So it's interesting you say that this yoga community that I found, this yoga and meditation studio, it as soon as I walked in, I knew. As soon as I walked in, the energy of the first person I met, all the way into all the other people I've met since, it's just where I'm supposed to be. And I think that's what we're missing sometimes when we just get caught up in this story. So
yeah, and I think what I want to add to that is like one of the things I've realized is that and I see this in some of the clients that I coach as well, and I see it in myself that when I'm not engaging or fulfilled by community outside of my immediate family, I put all that pressure on my kids to be my people. And they don't need to be my people. Like they
don't want to be usually.
They don't want to be my people. And like, I don't really want to be their people either. Right. We're very different. We're at totally different ends of the spectrum in our life. And like what that does for me and having my own community is it allows me to allow them to want to be with their friends and to spend time with their friends. And it also gives me an outlet where I don't feel like I still want to be connected to my kids,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm not starved for connections so that like they become like my lifeline, like I have a life outside of my kids. And I think that's so healthy. And I think whether you're divorced or not, like I think understanding that and creating that support system in your life is so essential for all relationships and just health in general.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Well, I could talk to you forever, I feel like. So I do want you to have an opportunity to share some of the great work you're doing right now, especially to talk about this book, if you wouldn't mind sharing with the audience.
Yeah. So I realized I don't know, probably within a year after I left the marriage that I approached the choice to leave a little bit different or a lot differently than a lot of other people. And that started with my commitment to it being an act of love. And so because of all the discernment, because of all the deep inner work that I had done, I started to realize more through people reflecting back to me that my story really needed to be shared. And the more I shared it, the more people started coming to me and going, I feel the same way in my marriage. I don't know what to do about it. And so here I am, a doctor of physical therapy, coaching people on how to know whether to stay or leave their marriage. And that turns into, like, I'm also coaching people in their parent-child relationship. And so it's really this beautiful journey. And as you mentioned in the introduction, like, I'm actually teaching a workshop in a couple of weeks called Relationships, the Holy Grail of Healing. Because that's what I started to realize. I was working with people with all these pain points, and I started to feel intuitively that how they were describing their pain was also how they were feeling in one or more relationships in their life. So I would have somebody with back pain, and she'd be like, oh, it's torturous and complex. And well, what else feels like that? My marriage feels like that in my life. And so every physical pain starts to be a reflection into our relationships, and we can heal that pain through healing who we are showing up as in that relationship, and really coming to clarity about what is the path of this relationship. Is it something that has run its course and it's time, and not just time, but is it best for both of us? I don't believe that a relationship ever ends. Like, a divorce isn't an ending of a relationship. It's simply a changing of that relationship. We're still, especially when there's parenting or when there are kids involved, the relationship doesn't end. You are still co-parents, and you always will be. And I don't want a life where somebody who I've spent 20 years of my life with, I don't want a life where he's not in it. You know, yes, the relationship is changing and I'm no longer your intimate partner, but like, I still want you in my life, and I still care about you and love you. So that was a little bit of a tangent, but yes, all of that's going into a book. It's probably about 75% complete. The rough draft of it is maybe a little bit more. So that, I'm hoping within the year will be
great
out on the shelf for people. Yeah, it's been quite a journey of starting and stopping in the writing process. And of course, more inward looking, more reflection. But yeah, I'm really excited, because I think it's going to be something that's really helpful for people who are in the same place. And one of the things I'm an advocate of, most of the people who come to me asking the question of should I stay or should I leave, they haven't asked the right questions yet to be able to answer the question. And so that's what I'm hoping this book can really be, that point of reference to help people ask the questions that they need to be asking in order to have that clarity from here, rather than just from ego or their belief systems.
Yeah, I love that you're doing this book, because let me tell you, my best friend in the world, what you said to me after my divorce, can you please burn all of those divorce books that you were trying to look for the answer around whether or not you should stay or go? and literally none of them told me. And I was like, isn't there a roadmap? Isn't there something that's going to say, okay, if this happens, then yes. If this happens, then no. I mean, I did that for so long. I thought there was going to be in, the pages, the answer. And so I love that how you described it, because that sounds like such a great resource for so many women who really, it really is our own fear. It's, the uncertainty of it all. And we have to get clear on what is keeping us stuck. And that, that's the inner healing work and all of the beautiful things you're doing. So I'm sure this book is going to be a great resource for women who get stuck in that place of should I stay or should I go? So Cassie, let's tell the audience, how can they get in touch with you after the show today?
Yeah, you can check out my website. It's got all the information on there. It's www.CassieSeal.LOVE, or email me at hello@CassieSeal.LOVE.
Great. Okay. Well, this has been such an amazing interview. Thank you so much for all of the wonderful nuggets that you shared with the audience today. And for those of you out there listening, If you're interested in joining the From Mrs. to Me community, you can find us on Facebook at From Mrs. to Me, Rediscovering You After Divorce, where you can find some great resources. And on Sundays, we are doing the second Sunday of every month, we are doing some group coaching calls on Zoom. So would love to see you join us. And thank you again. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, review, and provide your comments so we can keep this going. And remember, you can't pour from an empty cup. So keep doing that inner work, and I'll see you next time. And thank you so much, Cassie. I hope you enjoyed another episode of From Mrs. to Me, real life stories of real women and their journey of transformation after divorce. I'm Chrissy Freeman, and if you like this episode, please drop a review in Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. Do you have a story to share? Are you ready to inspire other women on their journey through divorce? If so, find me on Instagram at From Mrs. to Me. For more tools and resources on creating your path to transformation after divorce, follow my community on Facebook, From Mrs. to Me, Rediscovering You After Divorce.